The mining colony of Kepler 442b had always been humanity's forgotten outpost. Among the rust-colored canyons and endless stone quarries, young Marcus Chen scraped together a living alongside 3,000 other colonists who had drawn the short straw in life's lottery. At 17, he possessed calloused hands, a sharp mind, and absolutely no idea that his mundane existence was about to collide with the oldest civilization in the galaxy. The first sign of trouble came when the excavation team hit something that shouldn't exist. Deep beneath the surface, their plasma drills struck a chamber that predated human arrival by millions of years. The metal sang with an otherworldly resonance, and strange symbols covered every surface like frozen lightning. Marcus volunteered for the exploration team because someone had to, and because his supervisor promised triple pay for anyone brave enough to rappel into the unknown. What they found defied every textbook in human space. The chamber stretched for kilometers, filled with crystalline formations that pulsed with inner light. At the center stood a massive obsidian altar, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. "Don't touch anything," ordered Captain Rivera, the colony's security chief. But Marcus had already noticed something the others missed. The symbols weren't random decorations. They told a story, and somehow, impossibly, he could read them. The language flowed through his mind like water finding its course. Ancient words whispered of the Drakmori, the firstborn, who had ruled the stars when Earth was nothing but cosmic dust. They spoke of trials, of worthiness, of a covenant written in starfire and sealed with blood that burned like suns. When Marcus placed his hand on the altar, the chamber erupted in light. The crystalline formations sang in harmony, their resonance traveling through rock and metal to reach the deep places where things had slumbered for eons. Across the star system, on worlds whose names existed only in forgotten tongues, ancient eyes opened. The Dragonkin felt the call that had been prophesied since the last great war ended in their victory over the machine empires. Someone had touched the altar of binding. Someone had awakened the covenant. High Commander Velthak was the first to arrive at Kepler 442b, his dreadnought-class bioship sliding through space like a living mountain. The Dragonkin had evolved beyond their original forms eons ago, becoming beings of controlled energy and crystallized matter. Velthak stood 3 meters tall, his body a seamless blend of organic tissue and living metal that shifted like mercury. His eyes burned with the accumulated wisdom of 10,000 years, and his voice could shatter mountains or whisper secrets to atoms themselves. When he materialized in the chamber, Marcus stood waiting. The human boy looked impossibly small next to the ancient warrior, but he showed no fear. Something in his posture, in the way he held himself, gave Velthak pause. "You read the old script," Velthak observed, his voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber's crystals chime softly. "Impossible. The knowledge died with the archive keepers." Marcus met the alien's burning gaze steadily. "I don't know how I know it, but I understand every word. The Covenant speaks of trials, 3 tests to prove worthiness to lead the Dragonkin in their final age. Other Dragonkin began arriving, their massive forms materializing through dimensional rifts. Each bore the marks of their specialty. War leaders carried weapons that bent space itself. Forge masters wore armor that contained miniature stars. Mind shapers radiated psychic energy that made reality ripple around them. They surrounded Marcus, these beings who had conquered galaxies and reshaped worlds according to their will. Any one of them could have erased human civilization with a thought. Instead, they watched a 17-year-old mining colonist with something approaching reverence. "The first trial is combat," announced Cathrax the Sunbreaker, her form wreathed in plasma that burned without consuming. "Face our greatest warrior in single combat. Victory means advancement. Defeat means death." Marcus nodded, accepting a fate that should have terrified him. But the altar's knowledge flowed through his consciousness now, revealing truths that rewrote everything he thought he knew about reality. Humans weren't the universe's newest children. They were its greatest mystery. The trial ground manifested around them, reality restructuring itself to create a spherical arena of pure force. Gravitational fields created fighting platforms that floated in perfect balance. Energy barriers contained the combat zone while allowing the gathered Dragonkin to observe from all angles. His opponent stepped forward. Grimjaw the Deathless had earned his title by surviving every conflict for the past 15,000 years. His body bore scars from weapons that no longer existed, marks left by civilizations that had crumbled to dust while he endured. He wielded twin blades forged from collapsed neutron stars, weapons that could cut through anything in the known universe. Marcus received his weapon from the arena itself. A simple sword materialized in his hand, its edge sharp enough to divide atoms. But against neutron star blades, it might as well have been made of paper. The combat began with Grimjaw testing his opponent's reflexes. His first strike moved at a significant fraction of light speed, aimed to bisect Marcus cleanly. The human boy twisted aside, the motion so fluid it seemed planned rather than reactive. His counterattack came immediately, the simple sword somehow finding the microscopic gap in Grimjaw's armor. Grimjaw stumbled backward, purple ichor dripping from a wound that should have been impossible to inflict. Around the arena, the watching Dragonkin shifted uncomfortably. No untested warrior should possess such precision. The battle escalated rapidly. Grimjaw abandoned restraint, his neutron star blades leaving trails of distorted space-time as he unleashed combinations that had felled Titan-class bioships. Marcus moved between the attacks like smoke, his footwork defying the arena's shifting gravity fields. More importantly, he began to fight back with increasing aggression. Each exchange revealed new, impossible truths. Marcus's simple sword should have shattered against Grimjaw's weapons, but instead it parried every strike successfully. When Grimjaw activated his armor's quantum shielding, Marcus's blade somehow found frequencies that bypassed the defense entirely. Most disturbing of all, the human fought with techniques that predated the current Dragonkin civilization. The final exchange lasted 3 heartbeats. Grimjaw channeled the combined energy output of a small star into his weapons, preparing a strike that would unmake molecular bonds within a 1,000-meter radius. Marcus stepped forward into the attack instead of away from it. His sword moved in a pattern that carved reality itself, dividing not just matter and energy but the fundamental forces that held them together. When the light faded, Grimjaw lay on the arena floor, his weapons shattered and his armor cracked beyond repair. Marcus stood over him unmarked by combat, his simple sword gleaming as if newly forged. "Impossible," whispered Zethrin the Mindrender, his psychic emanations touching every consciousness in the arena. "He fights with the lost forms, combat techniques that vanished when the progenitors departed this dimension." High Commander Valthak stepped into the arena, his expression unreadable. "The first trial is completed. The human advances." He paused, studying Marcus with senses that could analyze matter down to the quantum level. But questions multiply. You fight like one of the firstborn, yet you are clearly human. Your genetics carry no trace of Dragonkin heritage, no sign of artificial enhancement. How do you possess knowledge that was lost before your species learned to make fire? Marcus wiped his blade clean and let it dematerialize. "I don't know. When I touched the altar, something awakened inside me, memories that aren't mine, skills I never learned. It's like I'm remembering a life I never lived." The implications sent ripples of unease through the assembled Dragonkin. They had ruled the galaxy for millions of years, believing themselves to be the inheritors of the progenitor's legacy. But what if they had been wrong? What if humanity carried something even older? something that had been waiting for the right moment to emerge. "The second trial awaits," announced Zethran, though his voice carried new uncertainty. "You must prove your worthiness to command our knowledge. The trial of wisdom will test not your strength, but your understanding of the fundamental forces that govern reality itself." As the arena dissolved around them, Marcus felt the alien knowledge stirring in his mind like a vast ocean of information. Somewhere in those depths lay answers to questions that could reshape the galaxy's understanding of its own history. But first, he had to survive 2 more trials against beings who had ruled the stars since before Earth's sun had finished forming. The mining colony of Kepler 442b continued its routine operations on the surface, completely unaware that in the depths below, a 17-year-old boy was participating in trials that would determine the fate of civilizations. Marcus Chen had started the day as a forgotten colonist scraping ore from alien rock. He would end it as something far more dangerous and infinitely more important. The Dragonkin had awakened expecting to find another species to add to their vast collection of client races. Instead, they had found their equal, and possibly their superior. The implications terrified them almost as much as they intrigued them. In the deep spaces between stars, other ancient powers began to stir. The Dragonkin's movements had not gone unnoticed, and news of the trials spread through channels that existed outside conventional space-time. Forces that had slumbered since the last Great War began to marshal their strength, sensing that the galaxy stood on the precipice of fundamental change. Marcus felt their attention like pressure against his consciousness, but the knowledge flowing from the altar provided context that should have been impossible for any human to possess. He understood now that his species had never been as young as they believed. Humanity carried genetic echoes of something far older, something that had been deliberately hidden until the right moment. That moment had arrived. And Marcus Chen stood at its center, wielding power he barely understood while facing trials that would either elevate him beyond imagination or destroy him completely. The trial of wisdom took place in a realm that existed between dimensions, where thought became substance, and knowledge carved itself into reality's foundation. Marcus found himself standing in a vast library that stretched beyond visual limits, its shelves containing not books, but crystallized concepts that pulsed with living information. Each crystal held the accumulated understanding of entire civilizations, some familiar, others so alien that viewing them directly caused his mind to ache. Zethran the Mindrender stood before him, his form shifting between solid matter and pure consciousness. Around them, other Dragonkin observers manifested as pillars of controlled energy, their attention focused with laser intensity on the proceedings. The trial would test not Marcus's ability to fight, but his capacity to comprehend the fundamental forces that governed existence itself. "Behold, the Codex of Universal Laws," Zethran intoned, gesturing toward a crystal formation that towered above them like a mountain of frozen lightning. "Within lies the knowledge needed to manipulate matter and energy at their most basic levels. To pass this trial, you must not simply read these laws, but demonstrate mastery over them. You must show us that a human mind can contain concepts that have challenged the greatest Dragonkin scholars for millennia." Marcus approached the codex, feeling its emanations wash over him like waves of pure information. The knowledge it contained was vast beyond comprehension, covering everything from the manipulation of quantum fields to the engineering of pocket dimensions. As he placed his hands against its surface, data flooded his consciousness at speeds that should have reduced his mind to plasma. Instead, something remarkable happened. The information didn't overwhelm him. Instead, it found pathways in his neural structure that seemed designed specifically to accommodate it. Complex mathematical formulas that described the interaction between dark matter and psychic energy suddenly made perfect sense. Engineering principles for building structures that existed in 11 dimensions became as clear as basic arithmetic. More disturbing still, much of the knowledge felt familiar, not learned but remembered, as if he had helped write these universal laws in some forgotten age. "Fascinating," Zethrin murmured, his psychic senses monitoring every fluctuation in Marcus's consciousness. "Your brain activity is unlike anything in our records. Human neural patterns typically collapse when exposed to even basic universal mathematics, yet you process advanced concepts as if they were native to your species." Marcus pulled his hands away from the codex, his mind now containing enough knowledge to reshape solar systems. But information alone wouldn't satisfy the trial's requirements. He needed to demonstrate practical application. The testing ground materialized around them, a pocket dimension where fundamental forces could be manipulated without affecting the larger universe. Here, gravity could flow upward, time could run backward, and matter could exist in states that had no names in any known language. "Your challenge," Zethrin announced, "is to create something that has never existed before. Not merely a new arrangement of existing matter, but something that expands the very definition of what is possible." Marcus considered the challenge while examining the raw materials available to him. In this space, he had access to pure energy, unformed matter, and the basic forces that held reality together. Most beings would attempt to build something impressive but conventional, a demonstration of technical skill rather than true innovation. Instead, Marcus reached deeper into the knowledge flowing through his consciousness, accessing concepts that even the Dragonkin had never fully understood. He began to weave together gravitational fields and quantum fluctuations, creating patterns that existed in states between matter and energy. His hands moved through complex gestures that guided fundamental forces with the precision of a conductor directing an orchestra. What emerged defied easy description. It was simultaneously solid and gaseous, existing in multiple dimensions while maintaining cohesion in normal space-time. More importantly, it was alive, but not in any way that previous science had defined life. This creation possessed consciousness without a brain, maintained complex thoughts without neurons, and demonstrated creativity that surpassed its creator's expectations. The assembled Dragonkin watched in stunned silence as Marcus's creation began to explore its environment, learning and adapting at an exponential rate. Within moments, it had mastered manipulation of the pocket dimension's altered physics. Within hours, it was proposing modifications to universal constants that would optimize energy efficiency across the entire cosmos. "What have you done?" whispered Cathrax the Sunbreaker, her plasma form flickering with uncontrolled energy discharges. "That entity you created, it demonstrates capabilities that exceed our own. You have brought something into existence that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in the universe." Marcus observed his creation with a mixture of pride and concern. The knowledge from the Codex had shown him how to build it, but the inspiration had come from somewhere deeper, from genetic memories that predated recorded history. "I followed the principles in the Codex but applied them through patterns that feel ancient. As if my species has done this before, long ago." High Commander Vielthak stepped forward, his sensors analyzing the new entity from every conceivable angle. "This creation incorporates design principles that we abandoned millennia ago because they were deemed too dangerous. The potential for exponential evolution exists within its structure. Given enough time, it could surpass every known species in intelligence and capability." The implications hung heavy in the air. Marcus had not simply passed the trial of wisdom, he had demonstrated capabilities that challenged the Dragonkin's understanding of their place in the cosmic hierarchy. For millions of years, they had considered themselves the apex of biological and technological evolution. Now, a human teenager was casually creating life forms that could potentially replace them entirely. "Enough!" declared Zethrin, though his voice carried undertones of uncertainty. "The second trial is completed. You have proven that human consciousness can contain and apply knowledge that challenges our greatest scholars." He paused, studying Marcus with senses that penetrated beyond mere physical observation. "But questions multiply exponentially. Your species should not possess the neural architecture necessary for such comprehension, yet you demonstrate capabilities that suggest otherwise." As the pocket dimension began to dissolve around them, Marcus felt compelled to address the growing tension among the Dragonkin. "I don't understand what's happening to me any more than you do. Every trial awakens more memories that aren't mine, more knowledge that I never learned. It's as if something has been dormant in human genetics, waiting for the right trigger to emerge." The created entity approached Marcus before the dimensional barriers could separate them. Its form shifted between states of matter as it communicated through direct consciousness transfer. The message it conveyed was simple but profound. It recognized its creator as something far older and more significant than appearances suggested. When reality reasserted itself, they found themselves back in the chamber beneath Kepler 442b. The obsidian altar continued to pulse with inner light, its ancient symbols now glowing with renewed intensity. The very air seemed to vibrate with potential, as if the trials themselves were building toward something momentous. "One trial remains," announced High Commander Velthak, though his tone had shifted from authoritative to almost reverential. "The trial of leadership will test your ability to command those who have ruled the stars since before your world knew fire. You must demonstrate that you possess not merely strength and knowledge, but the wisdom and authority to guide the Dragonkin into an uncertain future." Marcus nodded, accepting the final challenge while grappling with the growing certainty that these trials were more than simple tests. Each one had awakened something deeper within him, unlocking genetic memories that painted a very different picture of humanity's origins. The knowledge suggested that his species was not the universe's newest children, but rather its oldest survivors, carrying within their DNA the scattered remnants of a civilization that had transcended physical existence eons ago. The thought should have been overwhelming, but instead it felt like coming home. The alien knowledge flowing through his consciousness wasn't alien at all, but rather humanity's birthright finally reclaimed after countless millennia of dormancy. Around the chamber, space began to ripple as more Dragonkin arrived to witness the final trial. These were not merely warriors or scholars, but the absolute rulers of their civilization, beings who commanded fleets that could crack planets and wielded technologies that bordered on magic. They came to judge whether a human child possessed the authority to stand among them as an equal. What they found waiting for them was no longer the uncertain teenager who had stumbled into their ancient chamber. Marcus Chen stood transformed, his posture radiating confidence that came from absolute certainty about his place in the cosmic order. The trials had not simply tested his abilities, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in human DNA since the dawn of time. The final trial would determine whether that awakening was salvation or catastrophe for everyone involved. In the depths of space, ancient monitoring systems registered the energy signatures emanating from Kepler 442b. Civilizations that had remained hidden for millions of years began to stir, recognizing patterns that had not been seen since the last Great War ended with the progenitor's mysterious departure. The galaxy held its breath, sensing that whatever emerged from these trials would reshape the fundamental order of existence itself. Marcus felt their attention like pressure against his consciousness, but the knowledge flowing through him provided context that should have been impossible for any human to possess. He understood now that his species had never been as young as they believed, and that the approaching final trial would either restore humanity to its rightful place among the stars or destroy everything they had built in the attempt. The choice was his to make, and the consequences would echo across eternity. The trial of leadership began not with combat or puzzles, but with a simple question that carried the weight of civilizations. High Commander Valthak stood before Marcus in the ancient chamber, his form radiating the accumulated authority of 10 million years of rule. Around them, the greatest Dragonkin leaders materialized through dimensional rifts, each one a being capable of commanding fleets that could sterilize galaxies. "The Dragonkin face extinction," Valthak announced, his voice resonating through frequencies that made reality itself shiver. "Not through war or catastrophe, but through stagnation. We have ruled for so long that we have forgotten how to grow, how to evolve beyond our current limitations. Our civilization has achieved everything we believed possible, and now we drift toward entropy and decay." Marcus listened carefully, sensing undercurrents of desperation beneath the commander's controlled demeanor. The knowledge flowing through his awakened consciousness provided context that painted a grim picture. The Dragonkin had indeed conquered everything within their reach, but victory had brought unexpected consequences. Without challenges to overcome or frontiers to explore, their society had begun turning inward, consuming itself through increasingly elaborate internal conflicts. "Your final trial," continued Valthak, "is to provide us with purpose. Show us a path forward that leads to growth rather than decay. Command us not through force, but through vision. Prove that you possess the leadership necessary to guide beings who have ruled the stars since before your species learned to walk upright." The assembled Dragonkin leaders observed Marcus with expressions that ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. These were beings who had never acknowledged any authority higher than their own collective will. Fleet Admiral Korath had personally overseen the conquest of 17 galaxies. Forge Master Valthek had built weapons that could restructure the fundamental constants of physics. Mindshaper. Thessarian commanded psychic powers that could rewrite the memories of entire populations. They had agreed to participate in these trials because ancient law demanded it, but none expected to actually submit to human authority. The very concept violated everything they understood about the natural order of the universe. Marcus studied their faces, reading expressions that conveyed eons of accumulated pride and prejudice. The knowledge flowing through his consciousness provided insights into Dragonkin psychology that would have taken human scholars centuries to develop. More importantly, it revealed the fundamental flaw in their thinking. "You're asking the wrong question," Marcus said quietly, his words carrying across the chamber with surprising authority. "You want me to provide you with purpose, but purpose cannot be given. It must be discovered through voluntary choice and personal commitment." Several of the assembled leaders shifted uncomfortably. They had expected declarations of grand campaigns or promises of new territories to conquer. Instead, they found themselves confronted with concepts that challenged their basic assumptions about leadership and authority. Marcus continued, drawing upon memories that felt both ancient and immediate. "For millions of years, the Dragonkin have ruled through dominance. You conquered civilizations, absorbed their knowledge, and added their territories to your empire. But true leadership doesn't create subjects. It creates partners." "Impossible," snarled Fleet Admiral Korath, her crystalline form flaring with barely contained energy. "We are the apex species. We have evolved beyond the limitations that constrain lesser beings. Partnership implies equality, and equality with inferior races is both impractical and degrading." The response Marcus gave emerged from depths of knowledge that seemed to transcend normal human understanding. You believe you are the apex because you have never encountered anything that forced you to grow beyond your current limitations. But stagnation is not strength. The universe is vast beyond your current comprehension, filled with challenges that require more than technological superiority or military might. He gestured toward the chamber's ancient walls, their surfaces covered with symbols that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The progenitors who built this place faced the same choice you face now. They could continue ruling through dominance, or they could transcend their limitations entirely. They chose transcendence, ascending to states of existence that made their physical empire irrelevant. The assembled Dragonkin leaders exchanged glances, their confidence wavering as Marcus's words triggered recognition of truths they had been avoiding. The knowledge contained in their own archives supported his claims, though they had always interpreted the progenitor's disappearance as abandonment rather than evolution. "You suggest that we follow their path?" asked the Sarian, her psychic emanations probing Marcus's consciousness for deception. "Abandon everything we have built to pursue theoretical advancement?" Marcus shook his head, drawing upon strategic insights that seemed to come from genetic memories older than recorded history. "I suggest that you recognize what you truly are. The Dragonkin were never meant to be rulers. You were meant to be guardians, protectors of knowledge and shepherds of younger civilizations. Your empire exists not to demonstrate your superiority, but to preserve wisdom until species like humanity mature enough to inherit it." The implications of his words sent shockwaves through the chamber. For millions of years, the Dragonkin had viewed themselves as the ultimate expression of biological and technological evolution. The concept that they might be caretakers rather than inheritors challenged everything they believed about their place in the cosmic order. High Commander Velthak stepped forward, his sensors analyzing Marcus with unprecedented intensity. "You speak of inheritance as if humans possess some claim to Dragonkin achievements. What evidence supports such audacious assumptions?" In response, Marcus approached the obsidian altar at the chamber's center. As his hands made contact with its surface, the ancient symbols blazed with light that had not been seen for millions of years. The crystalline formations throughout the chamber resonated in harmony, their combined emanations creating frequencies that bypassed conscious thought to speak directly to genetic memory. The revelation that flooded the chamber challenged everything the Dragonkin thought they knew about galactic history. Images flowed through their consciousness, showing the true relationship between their civilization and the mysterious progenitors. The Dragonkin had not inherited the progenitor's empire through conquest or natural succession. They had been chosen, selected from among millions of species, to serve as temporary custodians until the time came for the true inheritors to claim their birthright. Those inheritors were humans, or rather what humans had the potential to become when their dormant genetic legacy finally awakened. The progenitors had not disappeared from the universe. They had scattered their essence across countless worlds, hiding fragments of their consciousness within the DNA of primitive species that would not evolve for millions of years. Humanity represented the progenitors' attempt at reincarnation, a way to return to physical existence after eons of transcendent stagnation. Each human carried genetic codes that contained compressed memories and capabilities from the universe's most ancient civilization. The process had taken far longer than anticipated, but Marcus's activation of the altar had finally triggered the awakening sequence. The assembled Dragonkin leaders processed this information with growing comprehension and mounting horror. Their entire civilization had been built upon a lie. They were not the universe's chosen rulers, but rather placeholders maintaining order until their replacements arrived. Everything they had achieved, every world they had conquered, every species they had absorbed, had been done in service to a destiny they had never understood. "This changes nothing," declared Admiral Korath. though her voice carried less certainty than before. Even if humans possess some ancient genetic heritage, they remain a primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel. The practical reality is that we command fleets while they struggle to colonize single worlds. Marcus smiled, the expression carrying knowledge that stretched across eons. Admiral, your fleets are impressive, but they represent technology that the progenitors developed millions of years ago. Would you like to see what humans can achieve when we remember who we really are? Without waiting for permission, Marcus reached deeper into the knowledge flowing through his consciousness. The altar's power responded to his will, creating a localized field that accelerated evolutionary processes by factors that defied conventional understanding. Within moments, changes began manifesting in his physical form that demonstrated capabilities no baseline human should possess. His body remained recognizably human, but every system had been optimized beyond previous biological limitations. His nervous system processed information at speeds that approached quantum computing. His muscular structure generated force outputs that could bend steel. His sensory apparatus detected radiation across spectrums that most species couldn't even imagine. More importantly, his consciousness expanded to encompass perspectives that allowed him to perceive the universe as the progenitors had experienced it. Space and time became malleable concepts that could be manipulated through focused intention. Matter and energy revealed themselves as merely different expressions of more fundamental forces that responded to will backed by sufficient understanding. The demonstration lasted only minutes, but its implications were staggering. Marcus had shown them a glimpse of what activated human potential could achieve, and it dwarfed anything in the Dragonkin's arsenal. This was not advancement through technology, but evolution through unlocking genetic codes that had been dormant since the dawn of time. When the transformation faded, leaving Marcus apparently unchanged, the chamber fell into absolute silence. The greatest leaders of the galaxy's most advanced civilization found themselves confronting the reality that they had been surpassed by a species they had dismissed as barely sentient. High Commander Veltak was the first to speak, his voice carrying undertones of awe and resignation. The trial of leadership is completed. You have demonstrated not merely the ability to command us, but the right to inherit what we have built. He paused, studying Marcus with senses that could no longer deny the evidence before them. What are your orders, progenitor? Marcus considered the question carefully, drawing upon strategic wisdom that spanned geological ages. The transition of power could proceed through violence and subjugation, following patterns that had defined galactic politics for millions of years. Or it could establish precedents for cooperation that would reshape how advanced civilizations interacted with emerging species. My first command is that there are no commands, Marcus said, his words carrying authority that resonated through dimensions the Dragonkin had barely learned to perceive. The age of empires built on dominance and subjugation is ending. What begins now is an era of partnership between species, each contributing unique strengths toward goals that none could achieve alone. The assembled leaders exchanged glances, processing concepts that challenged every assumption about power and authority they had held for millions of years. Some appeared relieved, as if a burden they had carried unknowingly was finally being lifted. Others seemed uncertain about their place in this new order. The Dragonkin's knowledge of technology and governance will be invaluable as humanity awakens to its potential, Marcus continued. But your most important contribution will be teaching us to avoid the mistakes that led to your stagnation. Power without purpose leads to decay. Growth without wisdom leads to destruction. Fleet Admiral Korath stepped forward, her crystalline form shifting through configurations that expressed complex emotional states. And what of our fleets, our weapons, the tools we built to maintain order across the galaxy? Marcus smiled, the expression carrying both understanding and determination. They will be transformed into instruments of exploration and protection. The universe contains challenges that require military strength, but those challenges lie beyond the boundaries of known space. In realms where entities exist that make the Dragonkin look like children playing with toys. His words triggered recognition among the assembled leaders. Their archives contained references to threats that dwelt in the spaces between galaxies, cosmic horrors that had been contained only through the combined efforts of the progenitors and their greatest servants. With the progenitors gone and the Dragonkin growing stagnant, those ancient seals had begun to weaken. "You speak of the Deep Ones," whispered Thessarian, her psychic emanations trembling with carefully controlled fear. "The entities that exist in the void between dimensions. They have been contained for eons, but our monitoring stations report increasing activity along the barrier zones." Marcus nodded grimly, accessing memories that painted disturbing pictures of wars fought on scales that dwarfed anything in recorded history. The progenitors' final gift to the universe was not their knowledge or technology, but their sacrifice in creating barriers that held the Deep Ones beyond the edge of reality. Those barriers are failing, and when they collapse entirely, everything we know will face extinction unless we are prepared. The revelation transformed the chamber's atmosphere from one of political transition to military briefing. Every leader present understood the implications. The Deep Ones represented threats that could not be fought with conventional weapons or traditional strategies. Defeating them would require capabilities that exceeded anything the current galactic civilization possessed. "Then our partnership begins with preparation for war," declared High Commander Velthak, his form radiating renewed purpose. "The Dragonkin place our fleets at your disposal, progenitor. Command us in this battle as you see fit." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling across his shoulders, like a mantle woven from starlight and necessity. The trials had awakened more than just his personal potential. They had activated humanity's role as the galaxy's defenders against threats that existed beyond normal comprehension. But first, he had to return to the surface and explain to 3,000 mining colonists why their routine existence was about to become the foundation for civilization's last hope against cosmic extinction. The transformation from Marcus Chen, unknown teenager, to the herald of humanity's galactic destiny was complete. The Dragonkin knelt before their human ruler not in defeat, but in recognition of ancient truths finally revealed. The age of dominance had ended. The age of partnership had begun, and somewhere in the deep places between stars, entities older than galaxies stirred in response to barriers that had contained them since the universe was young. The real war was about to begin, and Marcus Chen stood at its center, wielding the combined might of two civilizations while carrying the hopes of countless species who would never know how close they had come to absolute annihilation.